A bride stands in a vintage lace dress, a dress her mother wore, filled with love and hope. But the groom's family, the powerful Beaumonts, see only a simple woman staining their perfect legacy. In the most brutal moment of her life, they order her to leave her own wedding, just seconds before she's meant to walk down the aisle. They humiliate her, break her, and cast her out. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They never asked about her brother, and they never imagined that a single phone call would bring a storm, a helicopter, and a man who doesn't just own companies. He destroys empires. The air at Seacliff Manor didn't just smell like money. It smelled like history. It was the suffocating antique scent of inherited wealth, a heavy perfume of old-growth mahogany, floor wax, and the salty tang of the Atlantic Ocean crashing against the Newport cliffs below. Maya Goodwin stood before a full-length, gilt-framed mirror in the bridal suite, a room larger than her entire San Francisco apartment. She was a woman of soft edges, with kind eyes, and hands marked by calluses from her work as a freelance book illustrator. Her artistry was in bringing warmth to paper, in creating gentle worlds of watercolor and ink. She was, by all definitions, a gentle person. And in this house, gentle was mistaken for weak. Her wedding dress was the first point of contention. It was her mother's, a delicate, tea-stained masterpiece of 1970s lace, which she had lovingly restored by hand. It fit her perfectly. It was modest, beautiful, and profoundly meaningful. To the Beaumonts, it was a joke. "It's quaint." Genevieve Beaumont, Oliver's sister, had sneered during the fitting, her voice like ice cubes clinking in a crystal glass. "Almost historical. Did you find it in a costume shop, Maya?" Now, on the day itself, Genevieve circled her, holding a flute of Dom Perignon like a weapon. "You're still wearing that. I thought Mother had sent over the Carolina Herrera replacement. It was a sample, but it would have been cleaner." Maya gripped the small bouquet of wildflowers she'd insisted on. "It was my mother's, Genevieve. It's important to me." "Yes, well, your history isn't exactly what the Beaumonts are marrying into, is it?" Genevieve smiled, a tight reptilian gesture. "We're marrying you, the individual, a very, very lucky individual." Maya looked for her fiancé, Oliver. He was across the grand hall, already in his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, being pulled between his father, Senator Beaumont, and a contingent of investors. Oliver was a good man. He was kind, he was funny, and he'd loved her when they met in that tiny independent bookstore where her art was being displayed. He was the one who had pursued her, but he was also a Beaumont, and a Beaumont, she was learning, was like a ship built of the finest wood, but with a rudder controlled by someone else. His mother, Beatrice Beaumont, was the true captain. Beatrice was a formidable structure of tweed, pearls, and iron will. She hadn't spoken a single kind word to Maya in the entire year of their engagement. Every interaction was a polite interrogation, a subtle test Maya inevitably failed. Beatrice would ask about her family, and Maya would answer honestly. "My mother passed," Maya would say softly. "My father. He wasn't in the picture. It's just me and my brother." "Ah, yes. The brother," Beatrice would say, her eyes scanning the room for something more important. "The computer person. You said he lives in Oregon? Or is it Montana?" "He moves around," Maya would say, which was the truth. Rowan was reclusive. They hadn't seen each other in person in 2 years, though they spoke on the phone every Sunday. He was her rock, even from a distance. He was the only family she had, and he'd been working on a big project and couldn't be disturbed. He'd promised to be at the wedding, but a text this morning said his flight was grounded. Storm of the century, May. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to find another way. Maya's heart ached. The one person who truly saw her wouldn't be there. Guests are arriving, Maya. Beatrice's voice cut through the air. She glided into the bridal suite, a vision of icy blue silk. She didn't look at Maya. She looked at the idea of Maya and found it lacking. The string quartet is playing. The Harding family has arrived. The Van Pelts just moored their yacht. Everything is perfect. She paused, and her eyes finally, dreadfully, landed on Maya and her vintage dress. Except for that, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You were given an explicit opportunity to fix this. The Herrera dress was a courtesy. Beatrice, please, Maya pleaded, her voice trembling. It's the wedding. Can't we just— The wedding, Beatrice said, is not a party. It is a merger. It is a statement of continuity. Oliver's father and I have spent 4 decades building the Beaumont name into a synonym for excellence, and you walk in here looking like a farmer's daughter who got lost in an antique store. Oliver entered the room, his face pale, his bow tie slightly askew. Mother, my goodness, we're minutes away. Oliver, thank heavens, Beatrice said, turning her full, undivided front of disapproval on her son. Have you seen her? She is refusing to be reasonable. Maya, you look— Lovely, Oliver said, but his eyes darted nervously from his mother to his fiancée. He was sweating. She looks inappropriate, Genevieve chimed in, standing beside her mother. It's embarrassing. What will Camilla de Winter say? Her mother is a duchess. I don't care what Camilla de Winter says, Maya finally snapped, her own nerves fraying. I care what Oliver says. Oliver, tell me I look beautiful. Tell me you want to marry me. Oliver took a step forward, his hand outstretched. He looked at her, his eyes full of a strange, panicked regret. He opened his mouth, but it was Beatrice who spoke. Oliver, she said, her voice now dangerously soft. Tell her the truth. Tell her why this performance must end. Now. Oliver's hand dropped. He couldn't meet Maya's eyes. Mother! Not now, he hissed. Yes, now, Beatrice commanded, before she embarrasses you and our family in front of God and the senator's entire donor list. A cold, sickening dread, heavier than the ocean fog, filled Maya's lungs. The room suddenly felt very small, the scent of mahogany and roses turning sour. Oliver, Maya whispered. What is she talking about? What truth? The string quartet downstairs, which had been playing a hopeful, soaring piece by Vivaldi, came to a sudden, discordant stop. The silence that rushed in was thick and absolute. Oliver, Maya repeated, her voice smaller now, the first crack appearing in her composure. What's going on? Oliver's face was a mask of patrician panic. He was a man drowning in his own tuxedo. Maya, it's complicated. No, it's not, Beatrice said, stepping forward. Her pearl earrings seemed to glow with a cold, internal light. It's quite simple. Oliver has had a change of heart, or more accurately, a return to common sense. A change of heart? Maya's bouquet trembled, shedding a few wildflower petals onto the antique Persian rug. We're getting married in 10 minutes. That's the amusing part, Genevieve said with a short, barking laugh. You actually thought this was real. Genevieve, be quiet, Beatrice snapped, not out of kindness to Maya, but out of a desire to control the narrative. Maya, let me be blunt. A momentary infatuation in a dusty bookstore is one thing. A Beaumont marriage is another. You do not fit. You have no lineage, no assets, no connections. You are a charming little void." Tears pricked Maya's eyes, hot and stinging. Oliver. Oliver finally looked at her. The man she had loved, who had kissed her under a willow tree and promised her a life of partnership, looked at her with the eyes of a stranger. "Mother is right. I can't. The pressure is too much. The expectations." "The expectations," Beatrice clarified, "are that he marries someone of his own station. Someone who understands the burdens of wealth. Someone who can help secure the future of Beaumont Textiles." Maya's head was spinning. "Beaumont Textiles? But you're one of the biggest names on the East Coast." "We are," Beatrice said, "and we intend to stay that way, which is why this little charade is over." As if summoned by a dark spell, the door to the bridal suite opened again. A young woman stood there, framed in the doorway. She was everything Maya was not. Tall, impossibly slender, with hair the color of polished obsidian and a face that looked like it had been carved from marble. She was wearing a breathtaking, architectural Vera Wang gown, shimmering with thousands of microcrystals. It was the dress of a queen. This was Camilla de Winter. "Is it done?" Camilla asked, her voice bored, as if she were asking if the caterers had chilled the champagne. Maya's blood turned to ice. She looked from Camilla, the perfect bride, to Oliver, her cowardly groom, to Beatrice, the architect of her humiliation. You did this," Maya whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. This was all a lie. You were always going to marry her. "Not always." Oliver had the gall to look defensive. I do care for you, Maya. But this is bigger than us. The De Winter family, their connections, they can help my family. My father. It's business." "Business," Maya repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Our life, our love, it was business." "It was a gamble," Beatrice corrected, "and it didn't pay off. Oliver, darling, Camilla is here. It's time. The guests are waiting." Beatrice turned back to Maya, her expression devoid of all human emotion. "You, on the other hand, are not. The ceremony will proceed. Just not with you." What am I supposed to do?" Maya's voice cracked. "I'd imagine you'd leave," Genevieve said, picking an invisible piece of lint off her silk dress. "You're a guest who wasn't invited. This is a private event." Camilla de Winter stepped aside, holding the door open with a single, elegant hand. "Please. You're holding up the proceedings." Oliver wouldn't look at her. He was straightening his bow tie, looking at his reflection in the mirror Maya had used just moments before. He was adjusting his appearance to marry another woman, while the woman he claimed to love was being thrown out like refuse. It was the ultimate, soul-crushing humiliation. It wasn't just a breakup, it was an erasure. They were replacing her, like a flawed painting being taken down and swapped for a masterpiece. "Please," Maya begged one last time, looking at Oliver. "Don't do this." Oliver finally turned. His eyes were cold, the warmth she'd loved now completely extinguished. "Beatrice is right," he said, his voice final. "You should go. Now." "Go?" Maya repeated, the word hollow. "Just go." "Security has been alerted," Beatrice said, smoothing the front of her dress. She was already focused on the next task, marrying her son to the correct woman. "They will escort you from the premises. I trust you will not make a scene. The Beaumonts value discretion, even from our mistakes." "I am not a mistake." Maya's voice, though thick with tears, found a sliver of its strength. "I am the woman your son asked to marry him. I am the woman who loved him." "And you are the woman he is now asking to leave," Beatrice countered, unfazed. "Security." Two large men in black suits, who had been standing discreetly in the hallway, entered the suite. They were polite, impassive, and built like stone walls. "Ma'am," one of them said, his voice a low rumble, "we've been asked to show you to the service exit." "The service exit?" Maya recoiled. "You're no longer a guest," Genevieve smiled. "You're trespassing." Maya looked at Oliver, her heart screaming. This was it. This was the moment. The man she loved would surely not let this happen. He would not let her be hauled out of their own wedding by guards. "Oliver, one word." "Say one word and they'll stop," she whispered. Oliver straightened his cuffs. He looked at Camilla, who offered him a cool, encouraging smile. He took a deep breath, puffed out his chest, and turned his back to Maya. He said nothing. That silence was the most violent sound Maya had ever heard. It was the sound of her heart shattering. It was the sound of her future dissolving. The tears that had been threatening now came in a hot, blinding rush. The humiliation was total. The security guard took a gentle but firm grip on her upper arm. "No," Maya said, pulling her arm away. "Don't touch me. I'll walk." She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of dragging her. She held her head as high as she could, her mother's lace dress suddenly feeling like a costume of a fool. She walked past Camilla de Winter, who looked her up and down with an expression of faint pity, as one might look at a stray dog. She walked past Oliver, her fiancé, her love, who stood rigid, facing the mirror, unable or unwilling to watch her go. She walked past Genevieve, who was sipping her champagne, a look of profound satisfaction on her face. And she walked past Beatrice Beaumont, the architect of this entire nightmare. Beatrice didn't even watch her leave. She was already directing the flower girl. No, darling. Lilac petals, not white. The white is for—" She gestured vaguely at Maya's retreating form. That. Maya walked down the grand, sweeping staircase, the very staircase she was supposed to descend as a bride. The guests assembled in the grand hall below watched her. Their whispers were a physical force, pushing against her. They weren't whispering in sympathy. They were whispering in judgment, in confusion, and from some in amusement. She saw the Harding family. She saw the Van Pelts. She saw senators and bankers all staring as the simple woman was escorted, not to the altar but to the door. One of the guards opened the massive carved oak front door. A gust of cold, wet wind blew in, whipping her veil from her hair and sending it tumbling back up the stairs. The guard gestured. "Out." Maya Goodwin, the woman who had woken up this morning as a bride, stumbled out onto the stone steps of Seacliff Manor, alone. The heavy doors boomed shut behind her, sealing her out, sealing her future in. The fog had rolled in thick from the ocean, and a cold, persistent drizzle was beginning to fall. Her mother's dress, her one precious link to her past, was quickly getting soaked. She sank onto a cold stone bench, her body shaking with sobs that felt ripped from her very soul. She was ruined. She was penniless, heartbroken, and utterly alone, hundreds of miles from her tiny apartment, with no way to get home. She fumbled in the small satin bag she carried, her hands shaking so badly she could barely work the clasp. Her phone. She had to call someone. But who? Her brother. Her fingers, numb with cold and grief, navigated to his contact. Rowan. She hadn't wanted to bother him. He was at his summit, his big project. He'd been so stressed lately, talking about hostile markets and corporate betrayals. Her wedding was supposed to be the one piece of good news. She pressed the call button, not even knowing what time it was in. Montana? Or was it Wyoming? It rang once, twice. Maya, what's wrong? You should be walking down the aisle. Did you get my text? The flights are all grounded. Rowan, she sobbed, her voice breaking. The static on the line was thick, but his voice changed instantly. The casual brotherly warmth vanished, replaced by a focused, terrifyingly cold calm. Maya, where are you? I'm outside, she cried, pulling her thin arms around herself. They threw me out, Rowan. Oliver, he's marrying someone else. Right now. His mother. She called me a mistake and they threw me out. There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was not the silence of Oliver. This was a different silence. It was the silence of a computer processing 1 billion bits of data. The silence of a predator. What's the address, Maya? What? Seacliff Manor, in Newport. Rowan, I don't know what to do. Stay put, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Don't move from that bench. I'm on my way. Rowan, you can't, she cried. You said the flights were grounded. The storm. The commercial flights are grounded, he said. I'm not on a commercial flight. I'm 40 minutes out. Stay. Put. The line clicked dead. Maya stared at her phone. 40 minutes out? He was in Montana. How could he be 40 minutes out? The drizzle was turning into a driving, angry rain. Maya shivered, pulling the soaking lace tighter around her. She didn't know what to believe. She only knew that the man who had abandoned her was inside, warm and dry, celebrating his new life. And she was out here, in the storm, waiting for a brother who was half a continent away. The ceremony inside had begun. The string quartet, having recovered from the earlier disruption, started playing Wagner's Bridal Chorus. The sound was a grotesque parody, a mournful dirge filtering through the thick oak doors. Each note was a fresh stab in Maya's heart. He was doing it. He was really doing it. She sat on the stone bench, a tragic statue of a bride left to ruin. The rain had plastered her hair to her face, and the vintage lace was heavy and torn at the hem. She was numb. The cold had seeped into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the ice in her chest. Then she heard it. It wasn't thunder. It was a low, rhythmic thwack, 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 a sound that seemed to be coming from the sky, battling the wind. It grew louder, more insistent, a mechanical heartbeat cutting through the storm. Maya looked up, wiping rain and tears from her eyes. A light appeared in the swirling grey fog. A single, powerful beam that cut down onto the perfectly manicured, great lawn of Seacliff Manor. The sound became a roar, a physical pressure that vibrated in her teeth. It was a helicopter, not a small news chopper. This was a monster. It was sleek, black, and predatory, a Sikorsky S-76, a machine built for billionaires and special ops teams. As it descended, the downdraft was a hurricane. It flattened Beatrice Beaumont's prize-winning rose bushes, sent a $10,000 ice sculpture of a swan toppling onto the lawn, and whipped the canvas of the reception tent so violently that the center pole snapped. Guests inside the manor screamed, thinking the storm had breached the walls. The helicopter's landing skids touched the grass with an impossible, delicate precision, just feet from the ruined tent. The logo on its side was simple, 3 geometric lines forming an A. Ether dynamics. The turbines whined down, and the side door slid open. A man jumped out. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore black cargo pants, waterproof combat boots, and a simple, dark grey cashmere hoodie that Maya knew, even from a distance, probably cost more than her car. His dark hair was soaked. He looked less like a wedding guest and more like a man who had just stepped out of a war zone. He scanned the manor, his eyes sharp and analytical. He spotted her. "Rowan!" Maya cried, standing on wobbly legs. He was across the lawn in seconds. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" He didn't ask what happened. He just wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into the warmth of his hoodie. He was solid. He was real. He, she sobbed into his chest. "I know," Rowan said, his voice a low growl. He was already pulling off the hoodie, leaving him in a simple black t-shirt, and wrapped the Loro Piana garment around her shivering shoulders. It was like being wrapped in a warm cloud. "I heard." He looked up at the closed oak doors, his expression hardening. "Who?" "His mother, Beatrice, and Oliver. He let them." "Right." Rowan pulled a satellite phone from his pocket. He hit one button. "Brendan, you're awake. Good. I need you to find the lead security man at Seacliff Manor, Newport. Name's probably Mike or Frank. Bribe him. I want the audio from the bridal suite for the last hour. And I want the live feed from the main hall. Now." He clicked it off. "Rowan, what are you?" "Business," he said, using the same word Oliver had. But from Rowan's lips, it sounded entirely different. It sounded final. The front doors of the manor burst open. Oliver, his face pale and furious, stood there, flanked by the 2 security guards who had thrown Maya out. "What in God's name is this?" Oliver yelled over the wind. "You've ruined the tent! You're trespassing! Who the hell are you?" Rowan Goodwin looked at the man who had broken his sister. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "I'm the computer person," he said. He took Maya's hand, pulling her behind him as he began to walk, slow and deliberate, up the stone steps. "You can't come in here," Oliver shouted, his voice cracking with a new, unfamiliar panic. "This is a private wedding." "This," Rowan said, stepping onto the top step, "is a hostile takeover." The 2 security guards moved to block him. Rowan didn't even look at them. He just sighed. "Gentlemen, I just bought the company you work for. You'll have a new contract in your inboxes in about 5 minutes. It includes a 50% raise. Now, are you going to protect him?" He gestured at Oliver. "Or are you going to let your new boss inside?" The guards looked at each other, utterly bewildered. "I don't know what you're talking about," one of them started. Rowan's phone buzzed. He held it up. "Brendan? Did you do it?" He listened. "Good. Tell their families." He looked at the guards. "Your wives have just received a text confirming your new dental plan. It includes orthodontics." The lead guard's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His eyes went wide. He slowly stepped aside. "Oliver," Rowan said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he brushed past the trembling groom. "You made a very, very bad calculation." He pushed the oak doors open. Maya, wrapped in his hoodie, walked in beside him. The music stopped. 300 of the East Coast's most powerful people turned to stare. Beatrice Beaumont, standing at the altar beside a fuming Camilla de Winter, locked eyes with the intruders. "Security!" Beatrice shrieked, her legendary composure finally cracking. "Remove these wet people! Remove this thing!" she shrieked, pointing at Maya. "That thing!" Rowan's voice boomed, projecting effortlessly into the cavernous hall, "is my sister." The silence in the grand hall was absolute. The only sound was the drip of water from Rowan's t-shirt and Maya's ruined dress onto the priceless marble floor. Beatrice Beaumont's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "I don't care who she is. This is a private event, and you, sir, are ruining my son's wedding. You have destroyed a $100,000 tent. I am calling the police." "Go ahead," Rowan said, his voice calm. He walked forward, Maya still tucked beside him. He moved with a confidence that was alien to this place. It wasn't the confidence of old money, of lineage. It was the confidence of a man who knows he can buy the building he's standing in and turn it into a parking lot. "Oliver, stop him!" Genevieve shrieked from the front pew. Oliver, his face the color of ash, moved to intercept. "Look, Mr. Goodwin," Rowan supplied. "Rowan Goodwin." The name landed in the room and did nothing. It was meaningless. Just some guy. "Mr. Goodwin," Oliver said, trying to reclaim his authority. "You need to leave. You and Maya. Just go. You've made your point." "I haven't even started," Rowan said. He looked past Oliver, his eyes locking on Beatrice. "You are Beatrice Beaumont, head of the Acquisitions Committee for Beaumont Textiles. You've been in charge since your husband, the senator, moved to D.C. Beatrice bristled. "How dare you address me?" "And you?" Rowan said, pointing a finger at Oliver's father, Senator Beaumont. "You've been leveraging your company's assets to fund your last 3 campaigns. Illegally, I might add. The FEC reports are a joke." The senator, a big, blustering man, rose from his seat. "This is slander. I'll have you arrested for slander." "It's only slander if it's not true," Rowan said. He finally reached the front of the aisle, standing directly between the groom and the new bride. He turned to Camilla de Winter. "And you, your father, the Duke, is leveraged to the hilt. His entire fortune is tied up in a single, failing lithium mine in Bolivia. He's desperate. He needs the Beaumont merger to stay afloat." Camilla's bored expression faltered, replaced by a flash of genuine fear. I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do," Rowan said. "This isn't a wedding. It's a last-ditch effort by 2 drowning families to tie themselves together and hope they float." The guests were murmuring, the whispers growing loud. "Who is this guy? He's insane." "But the lithium mine. I heard rumors." Beatrice finally found her voice. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "You walk in here, spouting gossip. I'm the man who's been funding my sister's illustration career for 5 years, so she could pursue her passion without worrying about money," Rowan said, his voice softening as he looked at Maya. "I'm the man who told her to follow her heart, even when it led her to this snake pit." He turned back to the crowd. "And as for who I am to you, my name is Rowan Goodwin. I'm the founder and CEO of Ether Dynamics." Again, the name meant nothing to the old money crowd. They were textiles, shipping, real estate. Ether Dynamics sounded like a high-end stereo company. Genevieve actually laughed. "Ether? What? You own a drone company?" "Oh, how? Silicon Valley. Is that like one of those things you fly in the park?" A young man in the back row, a tech reporter for Forbes who had only been invited because his uncle was a donor, suddenly gasped. He typed furiously into his phone. "He's not a drone company," the reporter whispered, loud enough for the pews around him to hear. "Ether Dynamics. Oh my God. They just signed the $80 billion Sentinel contract with the Department of Defense. They're the ones who cracked quantum encryption." He stood up, his face white. You're that Rowan Goodwin. You're RG." The name RG hung in the air. RG was a legend, a ghost, a man who didn't appear on lists, who didn't do interviews, but who, in the last 24 months, had become one of the wealthiest and most powerful yet invisible men in the world. He wasn't a billionaire. He was the billionaire. The one who made men like Senator Beaumont look like small-town mayors. Beatrice's perfectly powdered face cracked. That's impossible. He's a myth." "I'm very real," Rowan said. "And I have to say, Mrs. Beaumont, I'm disappointed. I've been a silent majority shareholder in your primary lending bank, Patriot Financial, for 6 months. I've seen your files. I know your company, Beaumont Textiles, is a paper tiger. It's been bleeding money for a decade. You're broke. Or you will be in about 45 seconds." He pulled out his satellite phone again. Brendan. A new, terrifying realization dawned on Oliver's face. Wait. Patriot Financial. The Redmont Acquisition Group. That's me, Rowan smiled. I was distracted by this wedding. But now, my schedule has cleared up. He pressed a button. Brendan, you're on speaker with the Beaumont family. How are we doing on that margin call? A tinny, cheerful voice replied from the phone. We're doing great, boss. The algorithm has processed the new data and... Yep, Patriot Financial has just recalled the outstanding line of credit to Beaumont Textiles, effective immediately. Their liquidity just evaporated. The stock is halted. By Monday, they're insolvent. Beatrice Beaumont put a hand to her chest. She stumbled, and for the first time she looked her age. You wouldn't. He would, Maya whispered, a strange new strength filling her. You ruined my sister, Rowan said, his voice quiet, but carrying in the dead silent hall. You humiliated her. You called her a simple woman. You ordered her to leave. He took a step toward Beatrice, who flinched. So now, I'm ordering you, he said. Get out. Get out of my sister's wedding venue. Your venue, Senator Beaumont blustered. Yes, Rowan said. While you were all waiting for the bride, my attorney was finalizing the purchase of Seacliff Manor from the Newport Historical Society. I bought it an hour ago. As my first act as owner, I'm cancelling the Beaumont de Winter wedding. But, he offered a thin, cruel smile, I'd be happy to officiate the bankruptcy proceedings. Now, get out. The fallout was not a slow-motion collapse. It was a detonation. It was the instantaneous, violent chain reaction of two corrupt, hollow structures slamming into a bedrock of absolute truth. Insolvent? The first to break was Camilla de Winter's father, the Duke. He was a man whose entire life had been a performance of effortless superiority. He now stepped forward, his face a mottled, unhealthy red. Insolvent, he boomed, his aristocratic voice cracking. That is a liar's word, sir. Slander. Beatrice, you will tell me this. This person is lying. Our agreement was contingent on your company's stability. Rowan didn't even turn his head. He was still looking at his satellite phone, as if it held more interest than the fuming Duke. A liar, Duke. Liars use generalities. I use specifics. He tapped his phone. Brendan, you're still with me? Run the De Winter name, specifically Bolivian Lithium Ventures. Way ahead of you, boss, the cheerful, tinny voice chirped from the speaker, amplified in the dead silent hall. Looks like, oh, ouch. The SEC just filed an emergency injunction. Fraudulent reporting of mineral assets. Their stock is worthless. The injunction just hit the wire. The entire family is, well, the word screwed comes to mind. Screwed. The Duke repeated the word, his face draining of all color. He stumbled, grasping the back of a pew. Camilla de Winter watched her father collapse, not with concern, but with dawning, animalistic terror. Her bored, patrician mask didn't just falter, it shattered, revealing the raw, unfiltered panic beneath. She looked from her father to the now worthless Oliver, and then to Rowan, the man who was the source of this power. She realized in that instant that she was trapped. Her escape route was gone. She spun on Oliver, her voice a low, feral hiss that was more terrifying than any shriek. You, she seethed, her hands clenching at the microcrystals of her gown. You did this. You were supposed to be solvent. You were supposed to save us. You worthless. You're nothing. You're just as pathetic as she is. She jabbed a finger at Maya, who stood, wrapped in Rowan's hoodie, a silent observer of the inferno. Beatrice, clutching her son's arm, whispered, Oliver, Oliver, say something. Do something. He's bluffing. He must be. But Oliver wasn't looking at his mother. He wasn't looking at Camilla. He was staring at Maya. And in his eyes, a new, desperate, and utterly transparent calculation was happening. He saw the helicopter. He saw the power. He saw his last and only lifeline. Maya. He took a step, then another, scrambling past the frozen form of Camilla. His face, which had been pale with shock, was now twisted into a mask of desperate, pleading love. "Maya, darling," he said, his voice a pathetic whine that barely sounded human. I never meant. This was all my mother. It was her plan, I swear to you. She forced me." He gestured wildly at Beatrice, who was now clutching her own chest, her breathing shallow. "I love you, Maya," he cried. "I always loved you." He fell to his knees. In front of his family, his new bride, and the few guests who hadn't yet fled, Oliver Beaumont, heir to a ruined dynasty, knelt before the simple woman he had discarded. The sound of his knees hitting the priceless marble floor was a dull, final thud. "Please, Maya," he begged, and he did the one thing that sealed his fate. He grabbed at the hem of her ruined, muddy dress. "Tell him. Tell your brother to stop. We can fix this. You and me. We can still get married. Right now. This was our wedding, wasn't it?" Maya looked down at him. At this man, groveling at her feet, his hands soiling the very dress his family had mocked. She thought of his cold eyes in the bridal suite. She thought of him straightening his bow tie, turning his back on her. She thought of the cold, driving rain and the sound of the oak doors booming shut. She searched for the love she'd had for him. She searched for the pain, for the anger, for the grief. There was nothing. It was all gone, burned out of her. All that remained was a cold, clear, liberating pity. "No, Oliver," she said. Her voice wasn't a shout. It wasn't choked with emotion. It was clear, calm, and final. A simple two-letter word that ended her old life and his entire future. Oliver's face froze, the pleading mask cracking. But I love you." Rowan stepped in front of his sister, his body physically shielding her from the man on the floor. His movement was casual, but absolute. "You don't get to touch her." "Please, Mr. Goodwin, Rowan!" Oliver scrambled, turning his abject begging from Maya to the man who held his world in the palm of his hand. "There's been a terrible mistake. I was confused. It was pressure. My mother. Please, you can't. You can't just destroy a 100-year-old family legacy. It's un-American." Rowan almost laughed. The sound was cold, devoid of humor. "A 100-year legacy. Your grandfather built Beaumont textiles using child labor in unregulated mills. Your father used his Senate seat to kill 3 different environmental protection bills that would have cost him money. Your legacy," he spat the word, "is a century of taking, of bullying, of looking down on simple people." "You didn't just make a mistake," Rowan continued, his voice a blade. "You chose. You stood there in a $10,000 suit, and you let your mother order the woman you loved out into the rain so you could marry another woman to cover your father's debts. That wasn't a mistake. That was a character reveal." He checked his phone. A new alert had buzzed. And there it is. He looked up, scanning the back of the hall, and locked eyes with the Forbes reporter, who was holding his phone up, as if recording. "Thank you, Mr. Harding. The story just broke, didn't it? Beaumont Textiles insolvent, Ether CEO RG crashes wedding, citees personal reasons." The reporter, pale, just nodded. That was the signal. That was the final, Get out now, for the guests. The murmuring turned into a stampede. The social contagion was absolute. They fled, a cascade of expensive shoes and panicked whispers, scrambling to the exits, to their cars, to their phones, to call their own brokers and get as far away from the Beaumont de Winter toxicity as possible. In the sudden vacuum, the final collapse happened. Beatrice Beaumont, hearing the Forbes headline, hearing her son's final, pathetic plea, let out a single, guttural sound and fainted, collapsing onto the marble floor in a heap of useless tweed and pearls. Senator Beaumont didn't rush to his wife. He just stood, catatonic, staring at the state seal on the altar, his political career, his company, and his marriage all ending in the same instant. Genevieve in the corner was openly weeping, but her sobs were thin and selfish. She wasn't weeping for her mother or her father. She was weeping for her trust fund, for her cancelled Amex Centurion card. And Oliver just knelt, broken, in the middle of the aisle, a ruined groom between a fainted mother and a hysterical, and now ex-fiancé. Rowan looked at the chaos he had wrought. He felt nothing but a cold, clean satisfaction. He turned to Maya, and his entire demeanor, his voice, his expression, softened instantly. He was no longer the predator. He was just her brother. "I think your ride is here," he said. He took her hand, and turning his back on the wreckage, led her out of the grand hall. They stepped over the threshold, back into the storm. The rain was still a driving, horizontal force, but the air felt utterly different. It was no longer the air of her humiliation. It was the air of her escape. The roar of the Sikorski's twin turbines was a cleansing sound, a mechanical typhoon that drowned out the memory of the string quartet and the whispers of the guests. Rowan didn't let go of her arm. His grip was a grounding force as he guided her across the rain-slicked lawn. The downdraft flattened the grass in a perfect, pulsating circle, a crop circle of pure, unadulterated power. Maya had to lean into him to stay upright, her mother's dress, now a sodden, heavy shroud, dragging at her ankles. She glanced back only once. The grand oak doors of Seacliff Manor were wide open, a gaping mouth of faint yellow light. Figures were silhouetted within, some rushing out, some standing frozen. She saw the 2 security guards who had manhandled her, now standing ramrod straight by the door, statues of useless, obsolete authority. Rowan led her to the open helicopter door, where a man in a flight suit and headset nodded, his expression impassive, as if picking up a billionaire's sister from a ruined wedding was a Tuesday afternoon milk run. Rowan helped her inside. The transition was jarring. She went from a cold, chaotic, wind-swept night into a cabin of profound, surreal calm. It was not the antique, suffocating luxury of the Beaumonts. This was something else. The interior was upholstered in plush, cream-colored Poltrona Frau leather. The air smelled of new, supple hides, and the faint, electric ozone scent of high-end technology. A series of brushed metal screens were dark, the only light coming from the warm, recessed cabin lighting. It was less a helicopter and more a starship lounge, a cocoon of absolute silence and control. "In," Rowan said gently, guiding her to a seat that felt more like a throne. He knelt, his own expensive cargo pants soaking up the rainwater from her dress, and expertly clicked the heavy-grade 4-point harness over her. His movements were precise, practiced. He then reached into an overhead compartment and pulled out a thick, impossibly soft cashmere blanket, the color of dark charcoal. He wrapped it around her shivering shoulders, tucking it in with a practiced brotherly care that made a new, different kind of tear well in her eyes. "Rowan," she started, her voice a small, lost sound. He climbed into the seat beside her, a mirror image of her own, and clicked his own harness. He put on a headset, spoke a few short, clipped words she couldn't hear, and then offered a second headset to her. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. He smiled, a small, tired quirk of his lips. It's noise-cancelling. He placed it over her ears. The last, distant roar of the engines vanished, replaced by an intimate, cushioned silence. Where are we going?" she asked, her voice, now piped electronically through the headset, sounding foreign to her. "Home," he said, his voice now a warm, clear presence in her ear. "Well, first to my place in New York, the penthouse. It's got a fireplace and a kitchen that's never been used, but I'm told it's fully stocked. We'll get you some hot soup, a change of clothes, and about a year's worth of sleep." He paused, looking at her with an intensity that was almost painful. Then, "Wherever you want." "Paris?" "You always wanted to illustrate in Paris. I'll buy you a street." A sound left her throat that was half sob, half laugh. It was a rusty, broken thing, but it was a start. "You're insane, Ro." "I'm rich," he corrected, his voice flat, as if stating the sky was blue, which is just insane with a better PR team. The pilot's voice crackled. "We're clear, Mr. Goodwin." Rowan nodded. "Take us up." There was no lurch, no sudden movement. The helicopter, a machine of impossible power, simply ascended. It rose vertically, a smooth, vibration-free lift that felt like a controlled hand pushing them into the sky. Maya, compelled by some final, morbid curiosity, looked down out the window. Below them, Seacliff Manor was a scene of utter, biblical chaos. She could see it all, laid out like a diagram of a ruined life. The flashing red and blue lights of an ambulance, which was now pulling up the long, winding drive. Doubtless for Beatrice. The headlights of the fleeing guests, a panicked, disorderly chain of Mercedes and Bentleys clogging the artery of the driveway. The ice sculpture of the swan, a melted, pathetic lump on the grass. And then she saw him. Oliver. He was still on the front steps. He wasn't kneeling anymore. He was standing, his perfect tuxedo soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. He was looking up, his face a white, featureless mask of horror, watching them, watching her, be airlifted away. A single, pathetic speck, left behind in the wreckage of his own making. The man who was supposed to be her husband. The man who was to be the center of her life. He was now just a tiny, insignificant footnote in the story of her escape. She watched as the manor, the place of her greatest dream and her deepest humiliation, shrank. It was a grand, flood-lit dollhouse, a mausoleum of her old life. Then the helicopter banked, and it was gone, swallowed by the fog and the night. He was going to marry her, Ro, she whispered, her voice finally cracking, a final tear tracing a path on her cheek. He knew. He was standing there, in that bridal suite. He was going to let me walk down the aisle. Was Camilla just waiting in a side room? Was he going to stop me at the altar? Or just swap me out? He was a coward, Rowan said, his voice uninflected, but his hand came to rest on her shoulder. He was a weak man, born into a name he couldn't carry, trying to trade up. You weren't a speed bump, Maya. You were a miscalculation. A column in his spreadsheet that didn't add up, so he tried to delete it. But Beaumont Textiles, Patriot Financial. She turned to him, the fog in her own mind finally clearing. You were already targeting them, before any of this? This wasn't all. For me? Rowan sighed, and for the first time he looked tired, the billionaire vanishing, replaced by her older brother. Yes. And no. Beaumont Textiles was a target, Absolutely. They were inefficient, bloated, and corrupt. My algorithm flagged them 6 months ago as a perfect candidate for a hostile restructuring. I was going to carve them up and sell the parts. It was just business. And Patriot Financial? The bank? I've been buying up distressed regional banks for a year. It's a hobby, he admitted. They were all part of the same messy file. But Maya, he turned in his seat to face her fully. I didn't connect the names. You told me Oliver Beaumont from Newport. My file said O. Beaumont, Jr. of Beaumont Textiles. In my world, those are 2 different data points. I never thought to check. He actually looked ashamed. The man who's dating my sister, the most important person in my life. And I didn't even run his name. I'm sorry, May. I've been distracted. I should have seen this. I should have protected you. Maya looked at him, her reclusive, brilliant, terrifying brother, apologizing for a simple human oversight. Don't be, she said, her voice firm, and she found, to her shock, that she meant it. She put her hand over his. You saved me. You saved yourself, Maya, he said softly. You called me. You endured. You're stronger than any of them. He nodded to the window, to the storm raging silently outside. You're a Goodwin. And they're just Beaumonts. And by Monday, that name won't even be worth the legal fees. Maya leaned her head against the cool glass of the window. The vibration of the helicopter was a distant, lulling hum. She looked down at her hands, still clutching the edge of the cashmere blanket. She saw the lace of her mother's dress peeking out, soaked, torn at the hem, and stained with mud. Ruined. But as she looked at her reflection in the dark glass, with the lights of the coastline scattering like broken jewels far below, she didn't see a simple woman. She didn't see a mistake. She saw a survivor. She saw Rowan Goodwin's sister. Just then, the helicopter gave a final, powerful surge and punched through the thick layer of clouds. The suffocating, violent grey of the storm fell away. Above them was a vast, clear, impossible night. The sky was a black velvet canvas, so full of stars it looked like shattered crystal. The moon was a perfect, silver-white sickle. They were above the storm. And Maya, for the first time in her entire life, finally, truly, felt free. That was the story of Maya Goodwin and the Beaumont family. A story that shows us that simple is not the same as weak, and that powerful is not the same as invincible. The Beaumonts built their entire world on a foundation of lies, cruelty, and arrogance. They thought they could throw a good person away like trash without ever wondering who her family was. They found out, in the most spectacular and public way possible, that true power isn't in a last name. It's in the bonds you keep and the character you show when no one is watching. What did you think of Beatrice's takedown? What was the exact moment Oliver lost everything? Let me know your favorite part in the comments below. If you love stories of justice, revenge, and the underdog finally getting their moment, please hit that like button. It tells YouTube you want to see more content like this. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that karma is very, very real. Most importantly, subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you never miss another story. We have new stories every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening.